Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 1 of this rookie face-off tournament. That's a sort of tradition, I guess you could say, that the Sharks have participated in over these past few years, involving themselves and a few other of the teams near the west coast of the United States, the Avalanche, the Golden Knights, the Ducks, the Coyotes, and the Kings. It's not really much of a tournament since there isn't actually a winner. The Sharks are only going to play 3 of those 5 teams here, and their first game was tonight against their rival Anaheim Ducks. Rookie-on-rookie action, and a couple of non-rookies involved here for San Jose, and they managed to get the victory. And so going through the lineup here, going to be analyzing these players who we are seeing for the first time since, the end of last season, and potentially if you don't watch much like juniors or overseas play, you're seeing these guys for the first time since last year in last rookie tournament / preseason time. So we start off right away with William Eklund. Of course, all eyes on him when it comes to San Jose Sharks fans. He played 9 games in the NHL this past season before getting sent back to Sweden, and so many fans are hopeful that he can crack the team immediately out of training camp and preseason going into the regular year. And with Eklund, this was a pretty good game. Not absolutely outstanding, not amazing. He's not as though he was like 10 levels above everybody else on the ice, but it was a very good game. He made some nice plays, and generally, well, we should mention, he scored 2 goals in this game and also had a very nice assist on the 3rd goal that the Sharks scored. So basically, he was involved in every single goal the Sharks managed to get in this game. So even though he didn't necessarily blow me away with his performance, the mark of a very good very good player, I should say, is someone who, even in a game where they're not insanely dominant, can still put up points, and Eklund did exactly that. 3 points for himself, 2 goals, 1 assist. Certainly significantly better than what he was playing at in last year's rookie tournament, where he honestly didn't necessarily stand out that much. So the fact he gets 3 points here is already a great sign. When it comes to Thomas Bordelow, the other Sharks prospect who many are hopeful will be able to make the team out of training camp, he also managed to factor in on all 3 goals here for the San Jose Sharks. The first goal was by himself off of the nice pass from William Eklund, as well as the assist on the Eklund OT goal and a nice assist on the Eklund power play goal. So he was also a player who I thought there were at times in this game where I felt as though he was trying a bit too hard, where there just wasn't really that much chemistry between him and some of the other players that he was frequently trying to pass to. And so a lot of those times the passes were good conceptually, but didn't actually amount to much of anything. So when it comes to Bordelow, you could definitely tell the skill was there. There just wasn't necessarily that much finish to the plays that he was setting up, but definitely still an extremely positive game for Bordelow as well as for Eklund. So the future, at least for those two, is very bright moving forward. When it comes to their line mate, which was Scott Reedy, one of the non-rookies here for the San Jose Sharks, as he played a good handful of games just this past season, he finds himself surprisingly on this first line with these 2 players. Not surprisingly because Reedy doesn't deserve it, but surprisingly I thought they would give like an actual rookie who maybe has a bit more of an NHL ceiling a spot on this lineup, but I don't necessarily care. Reedy, I don't think was necessarily all that great in this game. I don't think he did poorly either. I mean, it's kind of a situation where since he was on a line with Bordelow and Eklund, my eyes were frequently trained onto those 2 players, and so I didn't necessarily pay much attention to what Reedy was doing in this game, but had he actually stood out, I probably would have noticed it, and it didn't actually happen. When it comes to the Sharks' second line, there was also some hope going into this one for this group of players. These were the Sharks' junior players who had some potential going into this season, not to actually make the team immediately, but to make, something happen at the AHL level, I would say. That is Gushin, Robbins, and Co. And this may have been the most disappointing line in my eyes for the San Jose Sharks here tonight. Gushin had a couple of decent offensive plays, but looked a bit lost at times defensively. Robbins, I felt as though was relatively invisible here tonight. Maybe a couple of puck touches, but besides that, not much. And Co honestly might take the medal for the most disappointing player of the game for me, at least on the forward side of things. Ko was a player who absolutely dominated the OHL last season, just bullying everybody with his side, with his size, with his strength, over 100 points. I was expecting big things here. Obviously, junior point level doesn't necessarily translate well to the NHL, but considering this is also playing against a bunch of other rookies, I thought he'd still be able to do something relatively similar to that, but that didn't really end up happening. Ko had a lot of poor reads here tonight, multiple different types of giveaways, and while there were a couple of okay plays from him, I was expecting a lot more, especially since prior to that 100-point season he just had in the OHL last year, he was in the last Sharks rookie tournament. He was actually on a line with Eklund and Bordelow then, at least for one of those games, and he was actually significantly more impressive there than he was here tonight, so that was a bit disappointing to see. When it comes to the Sharks' third line, this was a line that I actually was rather impressed by. Weisblatt, Russell, and Cardwell. Weisblatt in particular I thought had a very strong first period, very tenacious, hardworking, speedy, gritty type of player, which is honestly what he has come as advertised. He seems like the kind of player who you would absolutely love to have on a third or fourth line, which, honestly, it's not as though the Sharks are lacking completely of, but they could definitely use a bit more heart in that particular role. Mitchell Russell, who was the centerman here, I didn't really have any expectations of coming into this game. I wasn't even necessarily expecting to see him in the lineup, but he actually impressed me. Not as though he was amazing, at not Eklund or Bordelow level, not even a player who I suspect to be even remotely competitive for an NHL spot, but for someone who I didn't necessarily think much of at all going into this game, he actually played a pretty decently solid one. And then when it comes to the final player on this line, Ethan Cardwell, I thought he also showed some decent things in this game. Nothing extraordinary or any nature like that, but he actually played rather well. And so besides the first line that obviously stood out above the rest with Eklund and Bordelow, since the second line was actually rather disappointing, I thought the Sharks' third line was second best here in this game for the Sharks. And then when it comes to the fourth line, actually not too bad. Had an impact on this game, obviously not on the scoreboard, but I felt as though they made their presence known in this one. Gilmartin, McHugh, as well as Raska, I thought all were pretty good. Raska in particular I feel stood out here tonight, but that's not necessarily that much of a surprise because Raska was always a player last year at the rookie tournament and even in the preseason, coming right down to the wire towards the NHL season, who was rather impressive. And Raska definitely still seems to be on track to become a pretty effective fourth liner, maybe even third liner for the San Jose Sharks in the future, whether that'll be this season or next or the year after that. It does seem like that is in the cards for him. When it comes to the defensive side of things, we have the first pairing of Cicek as well as Ryan Merkley, another player who is not actually a rookie, as he played, like Reedy, a large handful of games this past season. And Merkley was basically the player who most of the plays for the San Jose Sharks kind of flowed through. Merkley generally had a very Brent Burns type of vibe this game, and that is both a positive and a negative thing, because while Merkley had multiple great setups and beautiful passes, his pass on Eklund's first goal of this game on the power play was a thing of beauty to really just quickly feed it through to Eklund to be able to take that shot off. Very, very nice. But then there were also multiple giveaways by Ryan Merkley, multiple nonchalant plays. It felt as though he had this sort of aura around him where he was maybe a bit too overconfident about the fact that he seemingly is a lock to make it to the San Jose Sharks roster. At least he believes he should be a lock to make it to the San Jose Sharks roster. So I'd be interested if maybe he can turn up the intensity slightly. Obviously, this is a rookie tournament game that means literally nothing. It's even below, you could say, the preseason level, because you're not even necessarily getting a full sort of look at from the main Sharks brass, like on the bench and things of that nature, as it was the Sharks AHL coaching staff doing the job here and not the NHL coaching staff. But still, I do expect a bit more intensity from Merkley going into the next game. When it comes to Cicek, he was the captain here tonight for this team, whatever that is necessarily supposed to mean. Generally, I don't exactly know. He was, didn't really do much, but considering he is in that kind of pairing role with Ryan Merkley, who I of course compared to Brent Burns, you expect that the pairing player of Ryan Merkley isn't necessarily going to be super have a lot of high highs and low lows, supposed to be a very constant player, and Cicek, you could say, was that here tonight. The second pairing I thought was actually pretty decent. Both Kniazev and Hataka had multiple moments in tonight's game where I was rather impressed with them, so that was definitely nice to see. Hataka always seemed to be a guy who was relatively close to being able to make it to the roster, even had some NHL games this past season. We'll see if that ends up being the case again this year. There have been a couple of signings that will make it a bit more difficult for Hataka to actually find a game with the San Jose Sharks next season, but there certainly were good things here tonight, and the same would actually go for Kniazev, slightly below Hataka, I would imagine, in the depth chart, but Kniazev honestly was always a player who really shone in these rookie tournament moments. I believe it was actually last season where he was I had named him like the MVP, not necessarily of the rookie tournament. I think of the development camp that the development camp game that the Sharks had prior to the rookie tournament last year. He was the most impressive player for me in that one. So Kniazev seems to rise to the occasion in these situations. Whether or not that actually pans out for him, I do not know. And then when it comes to the final pairing, honestly, not too much to say about either Furlong or Onyebuchi. Both of these players, they had a bit of ice time. They had a couple of decent moments, but nothing in necessarily, really catching my eye there. And then finally, when it comes to the goaltending, obviously Mason Beaupit did back up Strauss-Mann here tonight, but didn't actually play. Strauss-Mann was, though, rather impressive here tonight. Definitely made a lot of very nice saves, especially in that first period. Really kept that 1-goal lead there for the San Jose Sharks. Maybe not the most beautiful 2 goals to let in that he did, but he otherwise made a lot of solid saves and, was a pretty solid goaltender on the night for the San Jose Sharks. But that will do it for this review. Clearly, there were a couple of players who really sort of stood out above the rest there, with Eklund and Bordelow combining for all 3 of these goals here tonight. Eklund with 2 of them, Bordelow with the other one. Ryan Merkley also showing off some decent offensive skills. So if the Sharks want to continue to win these last couple of rookie tournament games, they'll probably need a bit more contribution from the rest of the lineup, as I doubt Eklund and Bordelow are necessarily going to be able to combine for 3 goals themselves every single game. But it was a good start, and nice to see that the Sharks' top rookies are acting like their top rookies. Class dismissed.